The Scorpion Ridge border checkpoint erupted in chaos as 30 heavily armed Los Zorros cartel operatives breached the facility's outer defenses. Gunfire echoed through the command center while ICE agents scrambled for cover, panic etching lines of fear across their faces. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, heavy and acrid, and the sound of chaos seemed to warp reality itself. In their arrogance, the most ruthless cartel in northern Mexico had made a fatal miscalculation. They had infiltrated what appeared to be a standard border station, unaware they had walked into the domain of America's most lethal four-legged defenders, military-trained K-9 units led by former Army Ranger Camila Flores. Deep within the facility, in the secure K-9 section, Bolts, a Belgian Malinois with 3 combat deployments to his name, locked eyes with his handler, Camila. This wasn't their first battlefield. They had faced peril before, and had lived to tell the tale. The tension in the air was palpable, each agent sensing that today was different, that the stakes were monumental. Bolts' ears perked up, his instincts kicking in, mirroring the urgency radiating from Camila. "Stay sharp, Bolts," Camila whispered, adjusting the tactical vest fitted snugly against the dog's muscular frame. "They think they can just waltz in here, but they have no idea what we're capable of." Bolts let out a low growl, eyeing the door as if sensing the encroaching threat just beyond it. Members of the Los Zorros cartel had made many assumptions as they stormed the facility, armed to the teeth. None could have fathomed the resolve of the guardians within. "Command Center, this is Flores. Bolts and I are moving to engage," Camila reported over the radio, her voice steady despite the rising tension. The response was immediate, a murmur of acknowledgement coming through, laced with anxiety. "Copy that," came the shaky voice of her superior. "We're locking down the perimeter, but there's heavy." Camila silenced her radio with a deliberate click, focusing on the sounds coming from the direction of the initial breach. The murmur of voices, the metallic clinking of weapons, and a tinge of laughter, the latter slicing through the cacophony like a shard of ice. The cartel was emboldened in their numbers, assuming they ruled the battlefield. She shouldered her rifle and bolted from the K-9 unit section, Bolts close on her heels. Together they moved through the shadows of the corridor, the dim lights flickering overhead like a faulty heartbeat. The atmosphere was thick with adrenaline and fear, but Camila felt only a steely resolve. She'd trained for this moment. She had prepared for the day when the enemy would think they could invade. The command center, a hub of intelligence and coordination, was now at grave risk. Outside, agents were responding to the escalating violence, but they needed to regain control, and quickly. "Bolts, this way," Camila instructed, her heart racing with both fear and a fierce protective instinct. The scent of unfamiliar bodies and gun oil wafted around them, but she leaned into her reliance on Bolts. He had saved her life more than once, acting not just as a dog, but as her partner, her other half in combat situations. They found their footing behind a solid wooden door that separated the corridor from the command center. Camila paused, listening intently. The distinct sound of gunfire rang out again, closer this time, accompanied by the urgent shouts of her colleagues. "Ready, boy?" she asked softly, adrenaline coursing through her veins. With a quick bark, Bolts confirmed his readiness. In a swift and calculated motion, Camila kicked the door open, both of them bursting into the command center. The scene was chaotic, agents were returning fire, while others frantically tried to relay information over the radio. The room was filled with the staccato of gunfire, muted shouts, and the sharp scent of fear. "Stand down," Camila commanded, her presence like a lighthouse in a storm. The agents turned at her voice, some faces lighting up with recognition. "Get to cover and regroup. We've got this." Bolts moved fluidly beside her, his body taut with anticipation as Camila directed everyone with a commanding presence. They needed to regain control, and that started with coordinated fire. "Identify the cartel numbers. Bolts and I will flank from the left. You 3 cover us from the right," she shouted, pointing to the agents. The group nodded, their expressions hardening with renewed determination. Splitting into pairs, they moved tactically through the command center. Camila gestured to Bolts, who instinctively sensed where to position himself. In training, they had learned to rely on each other, his instincts honed to read her body language, and Hayes trained to understand his. As they advanced, the cartel's presence became more evident, not just in the weaponry but through the fear they exuded. The body language of their opponents, brash and overconfident, was a stark contrast to the calculated precision of the K9 unit. "Stay low," Camila whispered as they crept towards the rear exit, the sounds of gunfire still ricocheting against the walls like thunder. Bolts moved silently, attuned to her every signal. As they rounded the corner, a cartel member appeared, weapon raised and ready to fire. Before Camila could react, Bolts lunged forward, his sinewy form a blur of muscle and determination. The assailant barely had time to register the threat before Bolts had him pinned to the ground, teeth bared but ready to restrain. "On the ground," she shouted, her weapon trained on the remaining cartel members. "Drop your arms." With eyes wide and fear-stricken, they complied. Camila advanced slowly, taking control of the situation with the icy precision of a soldier. This was her element. Tactics were her language. "Secure him, Bolts," she commanded as the cartel member lay still, submitting to the power dynamics that had shifted dramatically in their favor. With the enemy momentarily subdued, Camila moved in to assess the situation. "How are we holding out?" Reports came flooding in as agents began to regain composure, their morale lifted by the intervention of the K9 unit. "Multiple breaches along the southwest line, but we've managed to contain the northern approach," one agent reported, panting slightly. "No major casualties reported yet, but they are heavily armed." "That won't last long," Camila replied. "We need to push them back, hit their flanks." Just then, the radio cut through the din again. "All units, this is Chief Brown. It's a full assault. We need backup immediately. They are pushing through." Camila's pulse quickened. They needed to regroup and create a fortified plan of attack. She quickly gathered her team. "Listen up. We need to reposition and flank their central defensive line. They are strong at the entrance but vulnerable on the sides. Bolts and I will take one side, and I need you guys to cover the other." "On it," the agents replied, fueled by her assertiveness. They moved, a team unified by the challenge ahead. As they prepared to shift into action, Camila could hear the growls of Bolts, resonating with both loyalty and an inherent understanding of the urgency. Just then, a flurry of gunfire rattled the outer perimeter as the cartel realized their advance had stalled, regaining composure and pushing back fiercely. "Let's go," Camila shouted, leading the charge through the command center and out toward the breach as Bolts took point. They moved like a well-oiled machine, bolstered by adrenaline and the unwavering bond between dog and handler. Outside, the chaos was an overwhelming haze of gunfire and shouts. The Los Zorros cartel had fortified their positions, and Camila realized they were facing more than just random thugs. These were trained, organized operatives who had plans and expected resistance. "Cover me," Camila yelled as she darted to a nearby wall, peering around to gauge the number of threats approaching. Bolts, ever watchful, stayed close by, scanning for dangers. They could not afford to falter. With tactical signals exchanged, the K9 unit sprang into action, engaging the cartel with strategic ferocity. In the chaos, Camila noted that the cartel members were starting to retreat, but not in fear. Rather, they were regrouping, preparing for another push. "Watch the flanks," she warned her team. Bolts let out a bark that rang through the fray as Camila fired off a few quick rounds, making her presence felt. They would not be easily deterred. The firefight intensified, the air thick with tension and the heavy scent of fear and gunpowder. Camila felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was their domain, and they would fight tooth and nail to protect it. The sound of Bolts barking and engaging the enemy surged through her, spurring her onward. "Push forward, team," she yelled, courage unbroken as they advanced through the tumult. "We are not backing down." Fueled by the unity of purpose and the synergy between man and beast, they surged forward in one coordinated effort. The Los Zorros cartel had made their move, but they had crossed paths with a formidable force, one that would not just protect their home, but ensure the fight continued until every last ounce of their influence was extinguished. And deep in the heart of the command center, amidst the shots of chaos, an unyielding battle was underway, one that would reshape the narrative of Scorpion Ridge forever. It became clear that Los Zorros had woken a sleeping giant, and they would soon learn that failing to respect their opponent had cost them dearly. Bolts snarled, and Camila's soul ignited with the spirit of countless battles fought and won. This was just the beginning. The battle had only just begun. The battle had only just begun. The sounds of chaos rose around Camila and Bolts as they pushed deeper into the fray. She knew that the opening moments of a confrontation were crucial. Surprise went hand in hand with decisiveness. The cartel, emboldened and war-hungry, quickly realized their advance was faltering and regrouped, preparing for a counteroffensive. In the distance, through the smoke and confusion, Camila spotted the cartel leader, a tall man clad in tactical black, his eyes glinting with malice as he barked orders to his squad. Panic flashed through his men as they began to do what they should have done from the start. They were forming ranks, each armed man adjusting his stance and vision toward the advancing threats. Camila's gut twisted. She couldn't allow this resurgence. Bolts sensed her focus shift. The Belgian Malinois was attuned to her every thought, his muscles tightening in anticipation as he caught the scent of the enemy, courage and tenacity radiating from his very being. Camila turned slightly to catch the eye of an agent nearby, a young officer with the nervous energy of someone brand new to combat. "Get ready with backup, and keep your head down. We're going to push through," Camila instructed. The agent nodded, emboldened by her presence. Taking a deep breath, Camila gripped her weapon tightly and signaled Bolts forward. They peeled away from their makeshift cover, moving stealthily towards the edge of the clearing where the cartel regrouped. Every step was calculated. The cartels hadn't yet realized the true threat they faced, and she intended to exploit that. "Let's move," she whispered, voice low and firm. Bolts darted ahead, his instincts driving him. Camila followed closely, her heart pounding in rhythm with the determined sound of her partner's paws hitting the ground. They reached a patch of underbrush that provided cover, allowing Camila to survey the enemy's formation. The cartel operatives had lined up, weapons trained on the border station, oblivious to the imminent danger just beyond their sight. "This is it, Bolts," she murmured under her breath, her pulse racing. "We hit them while they are distracted." With a flick of her wrist, she utilized a small hand signal. Bolts crouched low, ready for the command. In one swift, decisive movement, Camila stepped out from the foliage, shouting as she took aim at the cartel leader's back. "Now!" Bolts launched himself forward, a dark streak propelled by instinct and training. Camila's rifle went off in tandem, her shots ringing out with precision. The cartel leader turned just in time to see Bolts barreling toward him. The silence fractured into chaos. The sound of gunfire erupted as her bullets found their target, but it was Bolts that left the most chilling impact. With a powerful leap, he tackled the leader to the ground, teeth sinking into fabric, drawing first blood. Camila followed up immediately with another round in the direction of the regrouping cartel members, creating a diversion that threw them into a state of panic. "Watch your flanks," she called to her team, grabbing the attention of a few shooting agents who quickly adjusted their aim, focused on protecting their own. Bolts bit down harder as the cartel leader struggled beneath him, a snarl issuing from the dog that would frighten any man touched by Faye. Camila could see the terror in the leader's eyes, and in that moment, she felt the power shift profoundly. The once confident aggressor now lay vulnerable before them. She jumped into the fray, moving quickly to stand over Bolts and his captive, her weapon at the ready. "Who's next?" she shouted, scanning the remaining cartel members as they hesitated, glancing at their fallen leader, then at each other. With the leader pinned and helpless, confusion turned to fury in their ranks. They began to regroup, shouting orders, the bravado of their numbers faltering. Camila was acutely aware that she needed to act fast to disrupt their momentum. "Keep firing. Suppress them," she commanded, and the agents quickly fell back into formation, bullets flying in dynamic bursts. She could hear the muttering around her, murmurs of shock and disbelief at what they were witnessing, a turn of the tide birthed from sheer will and the bond between a soldier and her dog. Bolts shifted, mouth still firm on the leader's jacket, eyes watchful and calculating. Camila leaned closer. "Who else is here?" she asked, lowering her voice just for their captive. "You're going to talk, or you'll find Bolts a lot less forgiving." Shifting beneath her, the cartel leader attempted to raise his hands, still wide-eyed. You're making a mistake," he hissed, fury crossing his face. "You think this changes anything? Los Zorros is everywhere." Maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't, Camila retorted, her voice steady. But it changes everything for you. Now, tell me about your position. The cartel's once imposing presence was dwindling. Agents working nearby were moving with synchronized precision, clearing the ground, forming a perimeter where order once again took hold. Camila could feel the tide shifting. They were gaining the upper hand. She saw a flicker of defiance cross the leader's face. It would be a grave mistake to be underestimated. "We'll return," he snapped, his bravado faltering as he met her unwavering gaze. "Not if you can't walk out of here," Camila warned, her eyes narrowing. She felt bolts tense beneath her, ready to act if commanded. "Now, tell me about the others in your ranks. You've got a window of time before I decide how energetic Bolts gets with the second round." The cartel leader faltered, weighing his options. "We operate in shadows. You think you're the only ones with dogs? This is merely a distraction, you fool," he spat, venom lacing his words. "We were never meant to stay. You should have let us in." As Bolts growled, Camila tightened her grip on her weapon and looked beyond the cartel leader, gauging the distance. The regrouping cartel members were now shooting back, but they appeared to be unsettled, their coherence crumbling under the scope of focus fire. "We've got enough intel from you to turn your whole organization upside down," she said steadily, not letting the leader's bravado faze her. "And we will find every last one of your operatives left behind." Before he could retort, another shot rang out. A gunman, hidden slightly to Camila's left, aimed and fired. The bullet was dangerously close, grazing her shoulder, throwing her off balance momentarily. Instinctively, Bolts released the cartel leader and sprang towards the sound of the gunfire, his fur bristling with intent as he raced toward the new threat. "Bolts!" Camila shouted as she regained her footing, whirling around to find the assailant. The commotion rippled through the ranks of the cartel, chaos reigniting amongst them as they scrambled in fear. In that moment of distraction, Camila moved closer, eyes locked on the shooter who was fumbling with his weapon, likely caught off guard by her fierce response. She adjusted her stance and fired a precise shot, her aim true. He crumpled to the ground. Bolts, having already subdued one cartel member, turned his attention back to the fallen leader, who was now trying to scramble away. "No more games," Camila said firmly, stepping forward and re-establishing control. "You'll tell me everything, or I'll let Bolts do as he pleases." She could feel the fear coat the air between them, the tangible shift that would seal his fate. The remaining cartel members hesitated, glancing back at their fallen leader, and then slowly began to withdraw. It seemed the confidence had drained from them, the realization that they had underestimated the defenders of Scorpion Ridge, weighing heavily in the air. "We won't be easy prey next time," the leader hissed as he met her gaze, a mix of anger and fear flashing within his eyes. "You think this is over?" "Maybe," Camila replied coolly, her weapon trained directly at him. "But it starts here. You will tell your organization that Scorpion Ridge is not a place for weakness. You're all on notice." With that, she signaled her team to pick up the momentum. "Secure the perimeter. We need details and a solid understanding of how many others might still be in hiding." Bolts returned to her side, the solid reassurance of his presence echoing through her as they moved to reset their defenses. The air was thick with tension, yet electrified by the victory that hung between them. As the cartel's assault fell into disarray, Camila took a deep breath, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. They were bolstered by their triumph today, but she knew this skirmish was merely a chapter in a much larger conflict. Los Zorros wouldn't stay quiet for long. The statements made today wouldn't go unnoticed. They were terms in a war that had only just ignited. "Let's plan for the next move," she instructed her team, determination settling into her bones. "We'll ensure they never forget the day they thought they could breach Scorpion Ridge. Bolts and I will lead the way." With that promise, she steeled herself for the trials ahead, knowing they would face whatever shadows lurked in the distance. Together, they were unstoppable, a handler and her dog, unwavering and fierce against the looming threat. Tomorrow might be uncertain, but today they had fought valiantly, and she wouldn't back down. United, they would continue to defend their home, whatever the cost. United, they would continue to defend their home, whatever the cost. Camila could still feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins as she scanned the terrain around the Scorpion Ridge facility. The remnants of the recent skirmish lingered like ghosts, echoing in her mind. Agents were working to cordon off the area, assessing the damage, and gathering information on the cartel's remaining forces. Bolts remained by her side, his watchful eyes scanning for any lingering threats. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of calm settling in Camila's chest. They had managed to push back the cartel for now, but she knew that the storm was far from over. Every breath filled with lingering tension served as a reminder of their dangerous adversary, the Los Zorros cartel. "Patch me through to command," Camila said firmly into her radio, her voice steady. "I need all available intel on cartel movements in the last 24 hours and any potential locations for staging or supply points." "Copy that, Flores," came the voice of her superior. "We're working on getting you updated intel. Hold tight." Her eyes flickered past the facility's perimeter, watching as agents moved about to tend to the wounded and gather themselves after the assault. The urgent murmurs of the men and women around her created an undercurrent of determination. She could sense the resolve in their body language, the willingness to fight. They had found strength today, and it would resonate for days to come. "Bolts," she said softly, kneeling to meet her partner's gaze. The dog's brown eyes gleamed with intelligence, his ears perked up, attentive. "We need to be prepared for what's coming. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." He nudged against her hand, a grounding reminder that they were in this together. She raised a gaze, scanning the horizon once more. In the shadows of the nearby mountains, a hint of dusk began to settle, the sun hovering low, casting long shadows and stark lines across the dusty terrain. "Flores, we're set to go," radio crackled to life again. "Intel is still coming in, but I've got some on my way," she replied, standing up and gathering her thoughts. The air was thick with the aftermath of the fight, sharp breaths of fear mixed with exhalations of relief. "Bolts, let's move." They traversed the facility, passing through the main operations room. Several familiar faces greeted her as she walked by. Some were still catching their breath, others exchanging notes of what had just transpired. Each nod felt like an unspoken vow, the will to stand strong against an insidious threat. Within moments, Camila pushed open the door to the briefing room, entering a hub of activity. Maps were displayed on the walls, littered with notes and pinpoints indicating previous cartel activity. A group of seasoned agents and officers gathered around a large table, their faces marked with determination. "Flores." Chief Brown's voice rang out as she took her seat at the table. "We've got a lot to decrypt from today's event, and we need your input." "Let's hear it," Camila replied, leaning forward as the seriousness of the situation settled. Bolts sat beside her, a quiet sentinel, his gaze fixed on the agents around the table. "Earlier today, before the assault on Scorpion Ridge, we intercepted communications from a few cartel members who were clearly discussing plans to hit key facilities within the area," Brown explained, pulling out a file and laying it before her. "They've been very aggressive lately, taking advantage of our attention being spread thin across multiple sectors." Camila flipped through the papers, absorbing the information rapidly. Her analytical mind kicked into gear as she traced over the marked locations on the maps. Each pin was a potential hotspot, a site where the cartel's influence could poison the region further. "Advice?" Camila asked, her voice steady and focused. "We need to clear these points before they can regroup." "This is where it gets tricky," another agent interjected, leaning over the table. "We may be able to get a team in, but we need to move fast. Their intel is solid. They know how to toy with us." "Then let's toy right back," Camila said, feeling the intensity grow within her. "We'll plan simultaneous strikes on these locations. Break them down into smaller units, keep the pressure on and confuse them at every turn. Bolts and I can take the lead on the first strike." Chief Brown nodded thoughtfully. "That's a bold move, but it could shake their confidence. Just remember, we can't lose anyone." As they laid out the logistics, everyone at the table sharpened the plan with precision, outlining responsibilities and allocating resources. Bolts sat quietly by Camila's side, blending into the atmosphere as if he were one of the agents, a silent partner, felt but not overshadowing. They discussed time frames, ensuring they maintained tactical superiority. All eyes were on the maps as they debated the enemy's patterns, trying to decipher the methods that could lead to their downfall. "Let's pin down the timings," Chief Brown pressed, gauging the team's insights. "They can't mobilize all at once. If we hit them fast and hard, we can disrupt their entire network." With each passing moment, Camila felt a surge of purpose, a fiery resolve. "I'll take lead on Recon and approach Cloverdale Point. If we can catch them blindside, it might throw off their overview." "Good idea," one agent chimed in. "We can use a drone for surveillance before we engage. With that, we might glean enough intel regarding numbers." "That'll buy us time on the ground when we strike," Camila nodded, feeling the adrenaline churn in her veins again. "On that note, we'll deploy simultaneously across all locations to ensure they can't redirect their firepower." In the heart of the plan, she could feel an electric charge igniting the atmosphere, a sense of unity surfacing that would transcend fear. Numbering their assets, the group committed to the strategies laid out, melding into a collective force poised to reclaim their power. Just as they reached a solid consensus, a hurried agent burst through the door, breathless, eyes wide with urgency. "Chief, we've got multiple sightings of cartel operatives near Cloverdale Point. Looks like they are mobilizing a supply drop." The room erupted into a frenzy of rapid conversations and prepared movements. Camila's breath hitched. The sage of intensity and urgency settled over her like a cloak. They had just been handed an opportunity, one that would demand decisiveness. "Flores, take your team, now," Chief Brown directed, eyes steeled with resolve. "Get in there before they get the chance to escalate." "No time to waste," Camila responded, her voice resonating with rising might. As she grabbed the gear and signaled to Bolts, that fiery trust ignited between them again. The battle was evolving, and they would meet it head-on. Together, they charged through the facility once more, confidence fueling each step. They were a storm coming quickly upon an unsuspecting enemy, ready to seize control of the narrative written by the impending confrontation. "Bolts, you ready?" she asked as they came to a halt outside, adrenaline thrumming in her chest. He barked in response, ready and undeterred. She took a breath, turning the gravity of the moment into strength. Determination cloaked her as they merged into the shadows, moving with a singular purpose, defending their home, no matter the cost. As they approached the site of the approaching cartel supply drop, only one thought filled Camila's mind. Today would be different. They would show the Los Zorros cartel who truly commanded this territory. They weren't merely defending their ground, they were sending a message that would resound in the mountains and valleys alike. And that message would echo far beyond the horizon. As Camila and Bolts moved stealthily through the underbrush, the rhythmic sound of their hearts pounding in concert replaced the chaos of earlier. Each step brought them closer to the cartel's supply drop, and the investment of their determination became palpable in the as they crested a small ridge. Camila paused to survey the scene below. A cluster of makeshift tents and vehicles sprawled out in the clearing, the cartel members oblivious to the storm that approached. Boxes laden with illicit goods lay piled high in the center, the very essence of their nefarious operations. Whispers and laughter echoed among the cartel members as they congregated in small groups, careless in their assembling, believing themselves untouchable. Camila's breath steadied. She could feel the energy shifting. This was their chance, their moment to turn the tables. "Bolts, stay close," she whispered, kneeling to feel the cool earth beneath her. Her eyes narrowed as she reached for her weapon, double-checking the magazine. She needed to be precise. There was no room for error. Within moments, a strategic plan formed in her mind. From this vantage point, she could identify the sector heads and the thugs surrounding the supply crates. She visualized the engagement sequences, a calculated approach focused on taking out first the guards, then the supply leader, sending a shock through the ranks. A nearby agent radioed in to report, shattering her solitary focus momentarily. "Command here. Cartel movement in the sector has increased. They are preparing for a transfer. Copy that, Camila replied, adrenaline surging through her. There was urgency in the air. Time was not on their side. We need to strike now. Bolts, keep your senses sharp. With a curt nod and an electrified energy between them, Camila rose to her feet, gesturing for the team to take their positions. She could feel the collective resolve pulsing within her, each agent drawing on the momentum they had built together. On my mark, she cautioned quietly, eyes locked on the nearest guard, who stood lazily against a wall of crates, completely unaware of the impending threat. Camila's heart thudded with anticipation as she steadied her aim, feeling bolts beside her poised and ready. 3, 2, 1, go. With the command, the world exploded in motion. Agents sprang from their hiding spots, weapons drawn and a unified shout erupting from their throats. Camila squeezed the trigger, her shot finding its mark. Immediately, chaos erupted among the cartel members. Bolts surged forward, a streak of movement that echoed the ferocity of their mission. He leapt through the air with determination, taking down guards with skill and precision, keeping them off balance. Camila felt a surge of pride as he maneuvered with agility and bravery, a true partner in every sense. The cartel operatives reacted quickly, panic surging as they stumbled over one another, desperately reaching for their weapons. But Camila and her team had planned for this chaos, maintaining control amidst the fervor. "Don't let them regroup," she shouted, her voice slicing through the melee. Agents surged forward, confident and defiant, echoing her battle cry. Camila sprang forward, bolts at her side, surging into the confrontation with fierce intent. The sounds of gunfire rang out in bursts around them, and she moved with a fluid grace born of countless hours of training and an unwavering bond with her loyal partner. They pressed onward, targeting the supply leader, a burly man who was trying to orchestrate some kind of retreat. Her eyes screamed for vengeance, and she wouldn't lose the opportunity to capture him. "Bolts, flank left," she commanded, and the dog obeyed without hesitation. He dashed with instinct and speed, darting to the side just as she fired another shot. The cartel leader flinched at the sound, eyes wide with realization. Camila pursued, adrenaline surging as she closed the distance. Moments later, she found herself face to face with the man, the embodiment of the cartel's threat. His bravado melted away as he registered her presence. The defiance flickered in his gaze as he stumbled backward, his men scattered and completely disoriented. "You've lost," she said evenly, steadied by the power of resolve. "It's over." He attempted to regain his composure, drawing his weapon. But Bolts was faster, soaring through the air and tackling the man to the ground with grace and force, pinning him down with sheer determination. Camila stood over them, weapon trained, her heart pounding not from fear but from the exhilaration of their victory. The cartel leader squirmed beneath her loyal partner, panic collapsing around him as defeat washed over him. "Now you'll tell me everything," she demanded, voice unwavering. The battle raged around them, but in that moment, it felt as if time stood still. The weight of this confrontation rested solely between them. Nearby, gunfire echoed as her team pushed the remaining cartel forces back. The tide had turned, and solace began to settle in Camila's mind. They were gaining ground, a victory within their grasp. The cartel leader, fear twisting his features, looked up at her defiantly. "You think you've won? There are others. You haven't seen the last of us." "I'm counting on it," she replied, voice steady as she motioned for her team to close in. "We'll hunt you down. You won't escape again." And in the wake of their confrontation, amidst the chaos and disorder, camaraderie surged amongst the defenders of Scorpion Ridge. One by one, the cartel remnants began to yield, their spirits broken. The strength of unity had proven mightier than any disbanded force. As victory clipped the air, Camila felt a rush of pride. They had sent a clear message. Scorpion Ridge would not be a battleground left in uncertainty. It had been claimed, its guardians prepared to protect the land with unyielding resolve. As the last of the chaos settled into victory's embrace, Camila looked down at Bolts, who was panting but keenly aware. The once looming shadows of fear and doubt dissipated with every breath they took standing together, marked as stalwart defenders of their home. "Great job today, boy," she said earnestly, kneeling to give him an affectionate rub. "Together, we unstoppable." And as they stood among their fellow agents, their family, the adrenaline faded, revealing the strong bond that had forged with each challenge overcome. Today, they had reclaimed not just their ground but their fight and voice in this relentless war. Whatever lay ahead may be daunting, but they would face it together, side by side, unyielding in their resolve. Under the expansive sky, reflecting the promise of a new dawn, Camila took a breath, looking into the horizon. The battle was far from over, but the war for Scorpion Ridge had entered a new chapter, one that they would write together, undeterred by fear, united by purpose.